Hey everybody, I just want to take a moment to thank all my subscribers and listeners that dedicate a little bit of time just to hear what I got to say. Thank you so much, but the struggle is real and it continues. Please spread awareness and do your part by making sure that you are subscribed and liking each of the episodes that you listen to. Share my episodes and spread awareness of my channel and what it is that I'm doing. These little things right here is what helps me grow and helps sponsorship come my way, as I am a struggling ex-con. I appreciate the support, the love, and thank you so much for tuning in. More to come. This episode has been brought to you by our friends over at CMB Law. If you find yourself in a tight spot and you need an attorney to trust, call Courtney over at CMB Law, 941-747-4440 or 941-725-9457. You can also visit her site at cmbjustice.com. cmbjustice.com. Again, that's Courtney at CMB Law. Tell them that Thomas FreeMe sent you from the Thomas FreeMe Podcast show.
Well, Merry Christmas, sir.
Yeah. Merry Christmas, Tanawha. Glad to have you back. Again, this is Thomas FreeMe with the Thomas FreeMe TV and Podcast show. I have Tanawha back again to keep going over our Constitution. And Mr. Tanawha has been nice enough to teach me the Constitution and the rights that I'm willing to protect for my country. And we're doing that, together with you guys together. And this will be the second installment. So, if you will, sir, how was your Christmas?
It was a little lonely, but we'll get there. You'll get better one of these years.
I was right there with you. I was by myself. I was just out working, and it was just another day for me. I ended up going down to the local casino down here, watching the Green Bay game. Okay. So that was my Christmas day.
Yeah. Well, I had about the same. I had some people that also didn't have family, and so we just got together and did no family together. So yeah, it worked out.
Well, there you go. Okay, so if you want to give us a refresher, a recap from last week, and moving on into this week.
Okay. So last week we talked about the social compact theory. The Constitution of the United States is a social compact. It's a contract that's developed and put into place by the people. And what it does, as a refresher, is that it establishes rights and it limits powers. So it guarantees the rights of the people and it limits the powers. Government has powers, people have rights. So once again, what happens is we come together in a natural state of man. We decide that we have all kinds of rights that are not good, that we don't necessarily want to be able to utilize or expend on other people. And so by giving up the negative rights, we actually receive a guarantee of we preserve the rights that would be not existent within the natural state of man. So for instance, in the natural state of man, we can kill. We can kill anybody we want because we have that right. But we don't want to kill people. Once we become free, we want to, actually be able to preserve that right, the right of life. So what we do is we give up our right to kill each other, to accept the obligation to not kill, and in exchange, we receive the right to not be killed. So rights always derive from another's duty to act. So as the duty is established or the obligation is established and we accept it, that produces the rights. Now, last week we didn't quite finish it, but there's two different pieces of within the Constitution. One is a civil liberty, and the other is a civil right. A civil liberty are those individual rights that are so imperative to human life and the social structure of society that they're specifically identified within the Constitution. So any of the rights that are specifically called out within the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, those would be civil liberties, and those are to never, ever, ever be interfered with by government, by anyone. So they're so imperative that we actually want to document them, write them down, and put them into place so that they're above any sort of political discussion. So those are civil liberties. They're not to be interfered with. Now, a civil right is a little bit different because what John Locke says, which John Locke is the philosopher that developed the theory of our government, what he said was that we gain civil rights by accepting the obligation to protect those rights of others. So as we accept the obligation to, for instance, guarantee that every single person has the right to vote, then by accepting the obligation to allow them to vote, we then receive that right ourselves. We don't have a right until we ensure that every single person within our society all has the same rights, because within an egalitarianism type government, such as we have, in order for laws to be legitimate, they must be considered just and equal. So if they're not just and equal, we don't have it. It's not a valid law. So once again, the Constitution, what it does is it establishes those rights for the people. Now, keep in mind that when the Constitution was put into place, when it was ratified and brought in, what they were doing, or what they were dealing with, was they were dealing with a very, very oppressive government in England, in Britain. And so this was the government that was taking the property of the individuals, taking the life of the individuals. They were doing it at a completely arbitrary and capricious manner. And so we decided that we put on our pants just the same as that king does, and we're going to declare our rights and our freedom because we have the same life that they do. We are all born the same. So when we talk about equal rights, and we talk about all being created equal, from the moment that we're born, every single human being is exactly the same. But what happens is that life is just a whole bunch of different steps, all these different decisions, different events, and different conditions that lead us to who we are ultimately in the end. And so that's where the discrimination or the variances come into place. We all are created equal, but over the course of time, we have different experiences, and those experiences directly relate to what we determine is real or not real. That's why two different people can be standing side by side each other and have a vastly different perspective on what is real and what's not, because those two people have different experiences. So if I were to say to you that there's racism in the world, you really couldn't understand me unless you have experienced it, right? If I were to say that there's injustice in the world, you really couldn't understand me unless you've experienced it. That's why it's so essential for us to actually share in the experiences of others, because in doing so, we can actually understand their reality, and in exchange, we can then create a mutual reality. But if we're unwilling to actually consider their perspective or consider what they're going through, then unfortunately, we're going to end up with discrimination, and because you can't believe in something that you've never experienced. So as we go through the Constitution here, what I want you to keep in mind is that as we read these provisions and as we talk about them, don't think about what a judge says. If you know case law in the past, don't think about that. What I want you to think about is this is the law, right? This is the only thing that United States citizens are accountable to. So the Constitution of the United States is the laws that govern the citizens. Any law or any ruling that is contrary to this document is in fact not valid. It's a lie. Congress itself cannot create an act that is contrary to the Constitution of the United States. There's a number of acts that I would point out that I would challenge and their validity, because they are in fact contrary to the Constitution, and anything that's contrary to the Constitution is in fact unconstitutional. So when we start to deal with, for instance, states' laws have to comply with it. So the only thing that we need to really worry about as a United States citizen is this document, because from this document, if we are aware of this and we know these provisions, then there's no lie that could turn us away. You'll be able to sort through it. You'll be able to say, wait a second now, why did that judge say that I don't have the right to be able to speak when I know that this document says that I do? Now you can start sorting through those lies. You can start saying, that person doesn't matter. I don't believe in him. He's not my, the one ruling over us. He's not the law, and so then we can proceed and understand what is truth and what is lie. So that's really important. So I just want everybody to understand that when you are dealing with constitutional law, when you bring in case law, it gets very, very confusing, because there's lots and lots of cases, and they're all conflicting with one another because they're largely based upon individual judicial decision that's based upon their own social, political, or public policy. When a judge makes a ruling, he's making a ruling based upon his own perspective, and his own perspective is not necessarily correct. Okay, so we have lots of different rulings that have lots of different meanings. So as we go through this, just make sure that this is what we need to follow. We can each interpret this, and we don't need anyone to interpret it for us. When it says we have the freedom to speak, that means we have the freedom to speak. It doesn't mean it can be taken away. So the last thing I'd like to point out is this. There's discussion right now about the suspension of obligations, right? Obligation contracts. So what's happening across the country right now is government is suspending the rights. They're suspending obligations. And that's happening under the Emergency Preparedness Plan. And the Emergency Preparedness Plan derives from the Patriot Act. So what we're saying essentially is that after September 11th, that this act of Congress was put into place that allowed for the government, our president, to be able to put into place a suspension of statutory obligations, so legal obligations, in the best interest of the people. So what's happening is that they're taking away our rights from this document, whether it's freedom of speech or freedom of religion or freedom to whatever it is, freedom of intimate association. They're taking it away from here, and they're doing it under the auspice of national security or health and well-being of society. So I just want to point out the fact that, one, this document does not allow for the deprivation of any rights in any condition. There's two things that government has. You either have a privilege, which is given to you by the government, which means that the government can revoke it at any point in time, or you have a right. A right is guaranteed. It's not revocable. So I cannot buy into the theory or the belief that our founders and our forefathers would write this document with the belief that government can suspend it at whim. It wouldn't have never happened. These rights should be guaranteed. These rights should be guaranteed. And if government's able to recall them, even in an event condition, even in an emergency condition, that would mean that they're not rights, that they're in fact privileges. And privileges are given to us by government. And that's what we have the situation we're in today. Government does not have the right to be able to take away our rights. The only way that this can be changed is through an authentic act of the people in accordance with the special amending procedures of Article 5. Any other way is, in fact, something called sedition. Sedition is defined as the speaking or writing of words intended to cause disaffection to the Constitution in order to procure its alteration in an other than lawful manner. When you start to speak or write words that make this document change without doing it in a legal way, that in fact is an act of treason. And we need to be very, very clear on that one. So thank you.
Do you think 9/11 was something other than what it was portrayed to be in order for this Patriot Act to be implemented onto the American citizens?
That's a difficult question for me to answer because
just a personal opinion. You don't have to answer it.
So years ago, before all this started, 5 years ago, I was on that side, and I believed in government. I believed in good faith of the people employed there. And I was, in fact, involved in multiple areas of government myself. So I have a very difficult time believing that we would do something such as that. But there is a lot of evidence that leads me to believe that it could have very well happened. I don't believe that our government is acting in good faith. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's done anything good for our people. It's been leading to the destruction of our nation, and that was always the danger of government. And there's too many questions that I have. The Patriot Act is not constitutional. It is absolutely 100% unconstitutional, and an act of Congress must comply with the Constitution of the United States. We cannot compromise the freedoms and rights, the principles that we boast about here at home and defend them abroad. We can't go over and fight a war when we ourselves are compromising those very values that we're out there fighting for. And the Patriot Act, unfortunately, it allowed for, here in the United States, it allowed for law enforcement to declare citizens of the United States terrorists or enemy combatants and hold them indefinitely. And you see the entire process of the plea bargain deriving from this act. They can hold you indefinitely as a result of an allegation that comes. They don't have to provide you with the evidence against you or the hearsay evidence or the witnesses. They don't have, every single thing that we saw with Guantanamo Bay and the terrorist suspects there that derived from the Patriot Act, we are seeing today in the plea bargain process. Absolutely 100%.
So what Tanawha is saying, for my listeners in layman's terms, is one of the factors that the Patriot Act did to us American citizens is, yes, if you get labeled as a terrorist, if you get arrested, indicted as a terrorist, you lose all your constitutional rights under what the Patriot Act is saying. So you have you're not protected by the Constitution because they're trying to say that you're a domestic terrorist. So therefore the Constitution does not protect you and your rights. So, but what's to say that anybody can't be charged as a terrorist? As we're seeing, people are being charged more and more for domestic terrorism on drug cases. So again, this is something that they're doing little by little, almost like a placebo effect on us, So it's time to wake up. And
Terrorism is defined as the use or threat of use of fear in order to bring about a desired result from one organization to another organization. And I can tell you that every single day, in every single jail, in every single prison across this country, there is a use or threat of use of fear in order to bring about a desired result from one organization to another organization. It is an absolute shame and disgrace on America that our global war on terror has entered into our own borders and has so dramatically impacted our own citizens. This is happening. It has been happening for quite some time. We're seeing it right now with COVID. We're seeing it all across the country. And
well, I'm glad that you read that definition, because again, this is my moniker again is I don't negotiate with terrorists. And it's exactly how you read it. You know, when you look at the definition as it's defined, and you start looking at our, a lot of our representatives, a lot of it fits that narrative. But for the longest, they have been telling us who are the terrorists. These guys are the terrorists. These guys are the terrorists. But
and so if you think about it, that there's always two sides to every story, right? But when you only attach to one side and allow that side to be presented, and then through an act of suppression or even ignorance, you prevent the other side from telling theirs, you're controlling the narrative. And every single day through the plea bargain process, government is controlling narrative. They're controlling narrative in order to win their case, right? They don't want to argue. They don't want to take it to trial, because if they did, then they would stand the chance of losing, right? So this is an act of terrorism in order to get you to do what they want. I mean, think about it. When you go to jail, lots of times they don't feed you enough. Now, that would be arguable. Some people say differently, but nonetheless, all through history, food has been one of the greatest devices to be used for terrorism, to inflict psychological harm on the victims by limiting the amount of food. If you don't have food sitting there, you're going to spend the rest of the day thinking about where you're going to get that next meal. And that's going to be all that you're going to think about. And that is absolutely a horrible, horrible thing to have to deal with. I know. And so by doing that, by minimizing the amount of food and getting you to have the psychological distress that they do, one, it makes you more willing to plead guilty, right? So it causes you to be more willing to do that. And two, it causes you to have to purchase products from their store at their price in order to eat, so it's a benefit for them on both sides. And we have to look at the system. We have to look at the fruit that's being produced by the system, and we have to ask ourselves, is it good? Because I'll tell you what, if we look at the fruit that's being produced by the justice system today, I'm going to tell you that it is not good. It is evil, and it is very evil, because any system that says, go ahead.
The statistics show that. Again, this is why I say, it's time for a different approach, and it's time for change, because these people have all the stats. They know what's going on, and this has been going on for the last 40 years, 50 years now. That the population has been just increasing staggeringly each year, to the point to where, again, I don't think people really realize we have over 2 million people incarcerated behind bars right now. That's 2 million people incarcerated. That's more than anywhere on the planet. So is it
17 times more than the next closest industrialized nation? But we have 10 million people within the system. 10 million
within the system. The whole industrial system, let's call it. So it's again, does America harbor the evilest people on earth? Is our judicial system so advanced that it catches 97% of the criminals? You know what I mean? So we know that none of that is true. So it has to go to what is the agenda. And this is what Tanawha and I are trying to uncover. So let me ask you this. Would you say that anything that is anti-constitution or goes against the Constitution, would you label that as an act of terrorism?
I would, because anything that goes against the Constitution is intentionally put into place in order to put United States citizens into a state of distress. Whether it's limiting our ability to speak and thus not be able to establish relationships, or it's limiting our ability to be able to go to church and thus limiting our ability to be able to have hope and find happiness. Each one of these are intentional acts to cause distress upon us. And yeah, I think that anytime Anytime you use threat of harm or actual physical harm, whether it's psychological, emotional, sexual, whatever it might be, anytime you do that, it is absolutely an act of terrorism. It is. And we need to come to terms with that. I mean, we have a global war on terror, and yet every single day we're inflicting terror upon each other simply because we want to judge each other. We want to point out and say, you're different than me. You got a different color skin, or you're different sex than me, or I have more money than you. Each one of these is an act of discrimination, and each one of those is put into place so that you can have some sort of power over another human being. And we got to stop this. Yeah.
Well, it's our job to stop that. It's we the people's job, because the government's not going to stop it. So
No.
it's our job. So speaking of we the people, moving into this preamble, at this time, it was, I believe the preamble was signed September 17th, 1787.
That's correct. Yep.
So what is going on at this time in that region, and just, as these forefathers are getting ready to sit down and write this document that I'm getting ready to read, what's going on?
So at this point in time, you got to keep in mind that we have already established our government. It's a confederacy at this point, and we've already won the Revolutionary War. So this is well past the 1776 period. So 1776 was when we declared our independence from Great Britain, but then we still had to go in, establish our government, go through the war, the Revolutionary War, and so on. So right now, during this period of time, what's happening is that we want a nation that's united. We want a united nation, right? And United States. We wanted to bring all these colonies together so that we can have, equality among all of them. And we wanted to have this place where all of the oppressed and all of the abused and downtrodden from the world would be able to come and find hope and opportunity. That was really our dream. But in doing so, we recognize the fact that there's going to be a lot of different types of people. There's going to be people that believe in different gods. There's going to be different people that are going to be different color skin. There's going to be all kinds of different cultural differences that we're going to experience. And as a result, we want to make it as free as possible. We don't want to have a single religion. This isn't a Baptist nation. This is a nation where we're going to recognize and value that God created every single person individually to be unique. And we want to embrace that uniqueness. They can believe in God, not believe in it, doesn't matter, because each one of them is who they are, and we're going to embrace the beauty of every single individual. That's largely what was happening. But what was actually happening was, and it's similar to what's happening today, is that with a confederacy is defined as two or more sovereign states with a decentralized government. So they have these sovereign states, kind of like the European Union. You have these different states that claim sovereignty, maintain sovereignty, so they have the ability to create their own laws and rule their people the way that they want, however they want, without any sort of interference from outside entity. So we had sovereignty of these states. And then we had a loose central government. So they had a government that they sent representatives to, and they would create laws or acts, legislation. But unfortunately, those were not being implemented at the state level. They had the central government, but there's no requirement for them to actually do what we agreed upon. So like I said, there's three branches of government, and there were three issues that we were facing, that James Madison and the rest of the Constitutional Congress was facing to try to resolve. Number one was the issue that I just explained, that we had a central government. They would create laws, and then they would send them out to these regional governments, and regional governments would decide whether or not they wanted to do it. But there's no requirement for them to do it because they were sovereign. We couldn't require them. So the first thing that we did was we created a legislative branch. So we have a representative branch of government that's represented by each one of the states. And by joining into this, any act that's created by the central government is required to be implemented at the regional governments. So each of the states have to integrate the laws that are created by the central government. That's the supremacy clause. This Constitution, the laws of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land. Okay? So we established the legislative branch first. Now, the second thing that we were having an issue with was we didn't have a court of final resort. We didn't have a high court that makes a determination as to whether or not the rights were being given to the citizens. We didn't have a court that made a determination as to a legal matter or legal decision that would impact every single one of them, and thus have equality and equal treatment. And so what we did to address the second issue was we created the judicial branch. Okay? The judicial branch was created to provide that court of last resort and to ensure that their decisions would be made that would impact all the regional governments, that there is a decision maker that's in place that would be able to do that and then flow them out for integration or administration at the regional governments. So we created the judicial branch. Now, the third issue that they were facing was there was no executive officer that was there to be able to ensure that the laws were enforced at the state level and properly administered or properly incorporated. And so what we did to address that was we, of course, created the executive branch. The president was created in order to ensure that the laws were enforced, that the laws of the United States were enforced at the state level. So that is what James Madison had conceived. He said, I'm going to create a government that has three strong but equal branches of government, and those three branches of government will have a separation of powers, and each one of those powers will be hermetically confined. And within that, then we will be able to have these checks and balances that will be able to, ensure that the government operates in the proper manner. So, for instance, the executive branch is responsible for enforcing the laws. They're law enforcement. So the investigation, the arrest, the bringing the charges, all of that would be done by the executive branch. That's why the prosecutors in every county are, in fact, the top law enforcement officer within the area, because they are enforcing the law. Now, the judicial branch, for instance, they're there to administer the laws, right? So they're there to administer them as written, right? So they're given the laws, and then they take them and they will flow them out, and then they will provide the judgment, they'll provide the sentencing, the punitive damages that will be associated with it, and they will act as a neutral, unbiased third party to oversee the proceeding, the legal dispute. And the third branch of government was the legislative branch. And the legislative branch is very, very important because we, the people, give the government the power to govern through the consent of the governed. We give our consent by creating our laws. The laws that we are subject to are only the laws that we create. No other branch of government has legal authority to be able to create laws. That's because Article 1 says all legislative power shall be vested in a Congress of the United States consisting of a Senate and a House of Representatives. That's all legislative power. Legislative power is the power to create laws. So when you talk about case law, for instance, case law is a decision made by a judge who is a representative of the judicial branch. That person does not have legal authority to create a law. That's why it's called a ruling, right? Judges make rulings, but they've kind of hidden it behind this case law. So when they say case law, you got to remember that's not law. That's a ruling, and rulings must conform with the law. We, the people, we determine what the laws are. We enact those laws, and then we agree to consent to be obedient to those laws. So when a judge comes along and says, I'm not going to follow that law, I'm going to make a ruling that's different than that law, that person does not have legal authority to do that. That is contrary to the Constitution, and that is in violation of their oath. It's a separation of powers issue, and they have, in fact, legislated from the bench. Same thing with the executive branch. They do not have authority to create laws. So when you have the president, for instance, bringing into place executive orders executive orders that are contrary to what the law states, the statutory law, those are in fact also unconstitutional because the president of the United States does not have legal authority to create laws. That must be done by the body that's constituted to do so. So that's very important to understand those things. So enforcement of the law does not come from the judicial branch. The judicial branch does not have authority to say, I want to charge this person with that offense. No, they're there to administer. Okay. Now, the executive branch doesn't have authority to say, I'm going to create this law, because that would be an overstepping of the separation of powers. But likewise, Congress doesn't have the authority to act as the judge and determine guilt. That must be done by the judicial branch. So we have these separation of powers, and they're there in order to preserve and protect the rights of the people. Okay, when we have an overstepping of those separation of powers, we have to get that addressed. Right, we have to get it addressed, because once you have that happening, then you have a despotic government. You have a government that's going to be oppressive to the people, and it's up to us to get it back on track. And one of the ways that you do that is, if you want to call attention to the illegal acts of one branch of government, you have to get the attention of the other two branches. As a result of this new oversight, they'll look into it, and as a result of that oversight, correction will be made. That those branches of government will order that branch correct their illegal and unlawful actions, and then we can come back to conformity and compliance with the Constitution. But once again, if we look at us, right, in America, and we look at how it works, that we give the government the power to govern through the consent of the governed, and we do that because we create these laws. So yeah, it's the people of the United States. It's our responsibility to hold our government accountable. And I know that deep down in all of our hearts, we know what's written in this document. I mean, it's in our blood, right? We know what's right. We know what's wrong. We know what we can and cannot do. And the reason why that is because every nation has a spirit. I mean, it's spirit. That's what substantive law is. That's the type of law degree that I have, is substantive law. So it deals with the spirit or the substance of the law. And so when a nation comes together, they create a law. And it's the same as a social contract. So, we come together and we decide that we're going to act in a just manner. And I make an agreement with these individuals that we're going to act in a just manner. And that creates a spirit, right? And that spirit is truth and justice, or whatever it is. Every nation could have a different spirit. But when we came together, we created a spirit of truth and justice, united as one nation. And so when we experience what's going on right now, and we have deep down in our heart, we just know that something's wrong, but we can't quite put our finger on it. That's the spirit telling us that something's being done contrary to what we believe in. If we believe in truth and justice, we believe in one nation, we believe in this Constitution, and we're being told to not believe in it anymore, then something's going to be wrong. And that's us telling ourselves that hey, you know what's right and wrong. Let's stand up for it. We can't be told that we can't speak. That's not something that can happen. And so when you deal with the Constitution, constitutionalism demands that the laws evolve only through suffrage. So it's voting of the constituency that changes the Constitution. And that's done that way in order to prevent disharmony. We want harmony across all the government. So we cannot allow individual infringement upon the majority agreed upon code of conduct. So when the majority agrees upon a certain act or a certain way that we're going to advance this relationship, which is simply laws, we advance the relationship through laws. When we advance the relationship, we have to do that through majority so as to prevent disharmony. So that's why Thomas Jefferson said that federalism is not about a single state or a small faction of states imposing their will upon the nation, but instead upon the states acting as a buffer, an essential buffer between the central government and the people, right? They're there to not impose the will upon the nation. We don't want individual states, because of their size or population, to be imposing what they want upon the rest of the nation, because that causes this disharmony. It causes this conflict inside of us where we all say something's wrong and I don't know what it is in this conflict. We want harmony, and we get harmony from recognizing the fact that we have a lot of different territories here. We have a lot of different cultures here. We have a lot of different types of people here, and we have to value those cultures of each one of these people that reside within our nation, because they are all residents and citizens of the United States. Not one person is below anyone else here. American is American, and they are all entitled to every single right secured and documented and enumerated within the Constitution of the United States. It's as simple as that. Because the moment that you take away a right from anyone, whether you do it intentionally or with scorn or judged or justly, you just took that right away from you. Because our laws say that any right that can be removed from one can be removed from all, because it's no longer right, but simply an illusion. So we have to recognize that.
But how did the forefathers say that when they're getting ready to write, sit down and write this, knowing that some of the party had slaves behind were slave owners?
So that's the irony that I find every day in this Constitution, right? That's the irony that I find, because, and I've been thinking about this since the last time we talked. The irony of the Constitution is that this document, it guarantees life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, right? Property. So we have guaranteed to us from this very document to every single United States citizen those rights. But within this very same document that guarantees those rights, it takes them away. How can that be? How can it guarantee, but at the same time take it away? What happened was we had the Constitution that was built upon egalitarianism, right? It's based upon the theory that all men are created equal. Therefore, in order for laws to be legitimate, they must be considered just and equal. They have to be equal. If you have a law that only affects one party and not another party, then you have a violation of the egalitarianism principle, which means that it would be unconstitutional, because you cannot bring a law into a constitution that does not comply with equal rights of all. Mm-hmm. Okay. So what happened, and this is my argument at this point in time, is that in this document, our forefathers, they did not want to give up their property. It was horrible that they did that, but they decided to they were doing the right thing, but then at the last minute they said, you know what, I'm not gonna do it. And they kept those people, and they created not a justice system, because it's not just. They created a system that has the ability to perpetually discriminate. The moment that they created a class of systems, people that are at different levels, because they didn't give up their property, their slaves, they created a system that was ultimately going to lead to the destruction of a nation. Period. There's no way around it, because ultimately the law will treat everyone exactly the same. That's why we have a criminal enslavement system today. That's why we're seeing so many people that are picked up and enslaved, because this system is designed to do that. It was designed from the very beginning. So,
Amen. Thank you.
And the 13th Amendment, shows that the very amendment that was written into our laws that was designed to dissolve slavery permanently, and that America's been believing for 100 years now that we don't have slavery. That very document, or that very amendment, says you can't have slavery, but you got to call it justice now. It's no longer a private institution. It's now a public institution, right? We have slavery. We have it all over. And you know what? Slavery is not only against the morals of Americans, it is against international law. We are the only industrialized nation that not only authorizes it, but has it written into our fundamental law. Wake up, people. You can't do that. The 13th Amendment says that we're going to take away slavery, but at the same time, we're going to go ahead and reinstate it. We're going to allow it. Come on.
Under a different name.
Under a different name. We're going to say it's now justice, right? That's not justice, guys. When you take people and you put them into abusive and depressing conditions so that they can make T-shirts and license plates for 30 cents an hour, that is called slavery, all right? The same thing is done over in China, and we want to call that a sweatshop. We're no better.
You know, I was thinking the other day when I was out driving around, and I was thinking about the old peonage laws and prison for debt, things of that nature. And I'm just sitting there thinking, because I'm a convicted felon and I can't get a house anywhere, in a nice neighborhood because of HOA. How is that any different? How is what the HOA does any different than peonage or redlining?
It's not. So like I said last week, or maybe the week before, we're dealing with an issue with sovereignty. These states are claiming sovereignty. They're claiming the rights of independence, that they operate independent of the United States. States don't have sovereignty. But like I said with the Hans decision, the reason why the Wake Court made that determination, made the ruling in Hans that declared that states are sovereign, which prior to that, they weren't sovereign. The decision in 1793, Chisholm versus Georgia, said that without a doubt, states are not sovereign. They gave that up when they became part of the Union. But this is the problem, and this is what I'm getting at here, is that when you become a slave, right? In other words, when you're convicted of a crime, right? Whatever crime that is, and that's why they work so hard to get that first one. They will convince you that, it's not a big deal. You'll take this, do an Alfred plea, we'll let you out today. Whatever they have to say to get you to accept that first offense. Through almost always through a plea bargain. They do it through threats, intimidation.
That's how they got my first conviction, was through a plea bargain.
You're not familiar with the system. You've never been involved in it. And as a result, you are very, very susceptible to their acts of intimidation and terror. Right. And so the moment that you plead guilty to that first offense, guess what? You just changed your legal relationship with the state. That legal relationship, you are now subject to the state of whatever it is that you live in. Prior to that, you are not subject.
Yep, you're indebted to the state.
Yeah. So a great example is this: that if you have the right to due process, and due process is in order to take away my liberty, in order to lock me up in jail, I need to have the right to call witnesses. I need to be indicted. I need to have the offense called against me. I need to have the ability to call witnesses. I need to be in front of a judge. So on all these things, right? But the moment that you change your legal relationship with the state, do you still have those rights? No. Why is it that DOC can enter into your home at any point in time in violation of the Fourth Amendment? Why is it that DOC can come and pick you up at any point in time and say, I believe that you are in violation of this, and take you down to jail? You don't get investigation. You don't get an attorney. You don't get to go in front of a judge. You don't get to be read what your offense is, and you're deprived of your liberty without due process of law. Why is that? Because you changed your legal relationship with the state. The state does not want you to be able to come out of that legal relationship because you're now enslaved. So that's why Hans was put into place. Hans was simply an extension of the Dred Scott versus Sanford case. Dred Scott was the slave that came into a free nation or free territory. And when he came into that free territory, he said, you know what, I'm free now because I'm within free land. And so he petitioned the Supreme Court. And the question that he asked was, do slaves have the right to sue in federal court for their freedom? Well, in the Dred Scott case, they came up with the absurd notion that blacks aren't people, right? They said that blacks are not, and we're not intended to be included under the word citizen in the Constitution. And then they said citizens and person are synonymous with one another. As a result, if you're not a person, you can't bring a case in a federal court. Guess what? Case dismissed, go away, slave. Waite said, you know what? I don't want slaves to ever get that close to ever being free again. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this Hans case that's been presented to us, and we're going to say the states have sovereignty. The reason why they said that was because the slave owner had already been switched to the states. Under the exception clause of the 13th Amendment, it says that states now are the slave owner, because if you can be held enslaved in indentured servants as a result of a criminal act, that is the state, right? So now if the state is a slave owner, then let's make the slave owner immune. Let's make them so that you can't sue in federal court. That's all that was. They made the slave owner immune so that we as slaves will never be able to sue for our freedom in federal court. That's all that Waite did. He did that. And it's not written in the Constitution. That's the most important part. Waite did that with intentional deception in order to,
So the slave owners were immune.
Yeah, that's all it is. The slave owners are now immune. The slaves are us. We cannot sue in federal court for our freedom because Waite wanted to make that decision memorialized from Dred
So
Scott.
in today's court, who's immune?
The state.
The
So
prosecution.
if the state,
The prosecutor.
yeah. So, right, but the prosecution is an agent of the state.
Yep.
So if you look at it like this, right? A body of men, well, just like James Madison said. So when James Madison, when we were trying to convince the United States and the colonies to pass or to move from the sovereignty of the Confederacy that we were in before into the Union and the constitutional based federal republic that we were proposing, we started producing, or James Madison, John Jay, and Alexander Hamilton, they went and they started writing the Federalists. So anytime you want to know what the provisions of the Constitution are, the best way to do it is to just go into Federalists. You got to read through it. You know, it's written a little bit, earlier time, so there could be some communication issues. But the reality is that an answer to every single question can be found in the Federalist. So Article 3, Section 2 of the United States Constitution says, in all cases in which a state shall be party, the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction. All right? There are two instances in the Constitution in which original jurisdiction, which means that that's the court that makes the first determination. No other court can make a determination until that court does. Original jurisdiction is assigned in two instances to the United States Supreme Court. One, anytime a foreign dignitary is named party, and two, anytime a state is named a party. Now, why is that? Well, because if a state is named a party, how can that state judge that cause fairly, right? James Madison said in the Federalist number 10, it was a New York packet, November 23rd, 1787. It was the article titled "The Union as a Safeguard Against Domestic Faction and Insurrection." In the article, he said, no man is allowed to be judged in his own cause because his interest would no doubt bias his judgment and, not improbably, corrupt his integrity. With equal, nay, with greater reason, a body of men are unfit to be both judge and party at the same time. You cannot be both judge and party at the same time. That was never intended to be that way. And yet we see that every single day across the country. And so when this happens, right, in order to have jurisdiction in a case, in order for a court to speak the law, it must have two things. It must have, first, subject matter jurisdiction. Subject matter jurisdiction is the authority to oversee the type of case brought before it. So in the case of a death, right, it would go to a probate court because that would be the court that would have subject matter jurisdiction to oversee the disposition of the deceased assets. Okay, you wouldn't take a will to a small claims court because they don't have subject matter jurisdiction. Now, the other thing that they have to have is personal jurisdiction, and personal jurisdiction is the right to oversee the parties involved in the dispute. Okay, like I said, there's two instances. It's assigned by the United States Constitution to the United States Supreme Court exclusively. Anytime a foreign dignitary is named party, and anytime a state is named party. If you think about it right now, what was your case? Most all of you, it is going to be state versus you. That is, in fact, an unconstitutional act because the states cannot be a party in the cause. They cannot be a party in the cause because when they judge, guess what? That body of men are all working against you. In the doctrine of master servant, in the doctrine of master servant, what it says is that servants will always advance the best interests of their master. So when the judge works for the state of Washington, is he not going to be advancing the best interests of his master? Absolutely. What about the prosecutor? He works for the state. What about law enforcement investigating? They work. What about CPS? All of these agents are all working to advance the best interests of the master. And that means that they don't care about your side. They don't want to hear anything from you because their master is against you. That's the doctrine of duties and rights. So I guess that my point here is that the Supreme Court has personal jurisdiction anytime a state is named a party, anytime. And that's assigned by the Constitution of the United States. However, Hans versus Louisiana altered that provision without it being altered by the people. So when the Wake Court came out and said that states are sovereign, guess what? Now states cannot be sued in federal court, which means that states can be a party in the cause anytime because the Constitution, it doesn't matter what it says.
Right. And now and then that'll lead to like how we see Texas wanting to succeed from the country, become a quote unquote country of their own.
Yeah, we're going to have disharmony, and that was the whole point in the Union. I mean, we knew George Washington, our founding father, he said in his farewell address, and I really admire George Washington. I'm very upset that he kept his slaves, that he didn't give them up, but I certainly admire him, and I hope that we all look up to him, because I do think he was a good man. But what he said is, in his farewell address, he said, "In contemplating the causes which may disturb our Union, it occurs as a matter of serious concern for the characterizing of parties by geographical discriminations, whence designing men may endeavor to excite a belief that there is a real difference of local interested views." George Washington, his greatest concern for our nation and the sustainability and stability of our nation was ensuring that we did not have regional variations or regional conflict in ruling. So we don't want states to say, "I have the right to rule differently." States' rights is code word for discrimination, to be able to treat the people within its jurisdiction differently than the people in other jurisdictions. That causes disharmony. It causes it. So the Constitution of the United States, when we switched to a federal republic, the whole intent was to bring union and harmony across the nation. We wanted everybody to operate the same way. We wanted the states to give up their autonomy and their sovereignty, which they did when they joined the Union and was subject to the laws of the United States. But we wanted that because we wanted all citizens of the United States to be treated the same, no matter where they choose to reside within the jurisdiction of the United States. You cannot have one citizen residing within the state of Washington that's treated differently than the citizen down in Texas, because guess what? That's not union. That's not the same. The only thing that holds our nation together is the faith in the laws between us. This Constitution is the only thing that connects Washington to New York, nothing else. So if the state refuses to enforce this or recognize this, guess what? There is no longer a United States, because we no longer have harmony. That's what we want to prevent. We want to look at this whole situation, especially COVID right now. We want to look at it. We want to say, is this what I want my country to look like? Do we want to have California acting differently than North Carolina? Do we want Washington imposing its will upon the rest of the nation by refusing to give the rights guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States to citizens residing within its jurisdiction? That derives from something called the doctrine of nullification, okay? And that was Andrew Jackson's vice president, Calhoun. Calhoun came up with this theory. He was from South Carolina, by the way, which happened to be the first state that seceded going into the Civil War. Calhoun came up with this theory that they can refuse to recognize the federal laws, and thus force the federal government to change their laws by, one, not recognizing it, two, refusing to enforce it, or three, going to war against it. And so that's what led into the Civil War. It was this doctrine of nullification. It was this belief that a state can say, "I don't like what you're doing, federal government. I don't like that decision. I don't want to give up my slave practice and my slave industry. Therefore, I'm going to keep it, and I'm going to not recognize the laws that the central government is making." And that claim comes from sovereignty. When the states start claiming sovereignty and they start saying that we have the right to be immune and we have the right to be alone, that is all perpetuating from the slave industry. And we see that right now. When the states tell me or tell us that they're sovereign, that derives from slavery. And that's what we have. Every one of these states. So there is no sovereignty. We have to have.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, when you put it like that, that makes a lot of sense, Tanawha. And I could absolutely see the friction because I mean, even traveling across the country, sometimes it's like you're going into a whole different country. Some of these states we go into, you can't even walk around without being vaccinated or have a mask on your face. And then you come to Florida and it's like, whoa.
So, one of the things is that we all know what America is. And I thought that I knew America, right? But there's two different beliefs. There's two different groups of people here in America. And there's an old saying that says that there are two types of fools in this world. There's those that choose to believe in something that isn't real, and there's those that refuse to believe in what is real. Okay. Here in America, we have two different fools. We have those that are choosing to believe in something that isn't real. All right. That was how I was a few years ago. I chose to believe in America. America is a principle. America is a belief. America is as it was founded and intended. I chose to believe in that. And I think that we can believe in that. But the difference is that reality. Because the reality is that America, you don't get to know what America actually is until you deal with those that are being abused by America. Once you go to them and you see how they're treated, then you can understand whether or not your reality or your belief is real. And I'm going to tell you right now that what we believe in is America. If you have never been involved in this system, what you believe in is a lie. It is not true. It's not true. So once you go in and you're involved in this system, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what color skin or what sex you are or race you are. You are going to be treated unjustly. You are going to be deprived of all the rights and all the principles that we are fighting for abroad. It doesn't have to be that way. Okay. We make that determination, but we make that determination because we stand up for those that are below us. We have that duty. Justice only manifests itself when we choose to defend those that are below us. And if we do, then justice, which is a manifestation of divine law, it will prevail. But the alternative is chaos. So we have to decide what we believe in. And if you've never been involved in this system, I'm going to tell you right now, it is not real. We're getting a little taste of it out here in the outside world, where you're being deprived of your right to a free and open election. You're being deprived of your right to be able to speak, or down in California, go to church. You're being deprived of those very same rights just so that God can show you that this is how it feels. This is how it feels for those guys down there. He wants this to be real for you too. So just like I said in the beginning, sometimes in order to believe in something, it has to be made real. Before it can become your reality, you have to experience it. I'm telling you guys right now, we're experiencing.
Well, no, you're exactly right. And this goes back again to saying what we discussed in the first episode was this is again why felons are ostracized. Because because we know the truth. We've been through the system, as you just elaborated, very articulately. And that's it, is that we know the injustice. We know that it's a facade. You know what I mean? And so therefore we have to be discredited, because now we're coming out like, hey, all this good shit that they're talking about, that's not what happens behind the scenes. This is what really happens behind the scenes. So we have to be discredited. We have to be made to look a certain way, so that when we come with that message, I was dealing with it today with somebody on Facebook. Again, it's that mentality as to, I can't believe people talk to the police the way they talk to, and this is why the police are treating us the way that they treat us, and because look how we disrespect them. Like, lady, get a clue. You know what I mean? It's out of hand. So
but what go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead. I was going to go into the preamble, but go ahead. Finish your thought.
Well, so injustice has this profound effect on people. Okay. When you experience injustice, it changes you, right? It changes you, and it causes you to do things that would be unimaginable in any other context. Because what happens with injustice is it causes you to want to help and save others, not just yourself, but others, the others that you feel are being unfairly treated. And I'm telling you, these people that I'm meeting all across the country right now that are advocates of justice, these people, they've experienced something and it's changed them. And you can listen to what they have to say, because they're not doing it to save themselves. They're not doing it because they're comfortable. They're not doing it to make money. They're doing it because they believe in it. And I'll tell you what, if you want to believe in something, believe in the ones that are actually fighting. Don't believe in the ones that are wishy-washy. Don't believe in the ones that are pressing. Don't believe in the ones that just tell you something, but tell you not to look into it. We have the evidence. We can show you it. Every single one of us, we're doing this not because we're comfortable, not because we're doing this because we're trying to help everyone. We're trying to help those that are being hurt, as well as those that haven't been hurt yet. We're trying to open up some eyes and make people see the reality of what,
because it's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. We have one life. Tanawha, you have one life. I have one life, with this vessel. And because, I make an egregious mistake, you know what I mean? An emotional, egregious mistake, I'm to lose any sense of right to my life to advance just like anybody else because of this one egregious mistake that I feel I was made to make. Again, I have my own personal beliefs that this oppression is put on us for us to make these decisions that we make in order for the hamster wheel to keep spinning.
Yeah, you know, I came across a very interesting statement, and it was by Bernard Leitcher, who was the founder of the European Union currency system. Okay, and it kind of coincides with what you just said and what I've been saying for a while.
System. Pay attention, people.
Yes, the European Union currency system. What he said was greed and competition are not the results of immutable human temperament. Greed and fear of scarcity are in fact being created and amplified. They are the direct consequences that we have to fight with each other in order to survive. So you see, greed is not a normal human instinct. This race issue, this tension that we, this is not a normal human reaction. This is being created and it's being amplified and it's being done in order to force us into fighting with each other in order to survive. It's being done in order to keep the attention off of the true antagonist, which is the government. We aren't the cause of this problem. So if you look at Guantanamo Bay, what happened was we were taking a whole bunch of suspected terrorists, and I'm not saying that they all weren't bad. I'm saying that there were more than enough that weren't bad. They weren't supposed to be there at all. But we were putting them through some horrible tactics called deprivation tactics, which was inflicting intense emotional and psychological harm upon them, which has caused them to act and change and be different. And as a result, we were creating the very people that we were going out and fight on the battlefield. And we were doing it in order to justify the war efforts. Now, those exact same tactics are used every single day in every single jail and prison across the country here, right? So we're picking up people that are sane, you know, that may have done something wrong, but we're bringing them into a situation where we're going to inflict heavy emotional and psychological pain upon them, which is going to cause them to act crazy. And then the system's going to point at them and say, this person's crazy in order to justify this war on crime. We are creating that system is creating the very people that it's saying it's reforming.
Reforming. One of the most powerful statements that I've heard here in recent times came from Exoneree and one of my co-hosts on the new Criminal Justice Network. So Mr. Larry Darnell Smith, when he said that, you know, Larry Smith spent 27 years in prison as a completely innocent man, and he was exonerated of that after 27 years. But it's like he said, he committed more crimes in prison than he ever committed on the street. You know, and that in itself is something to say and think about, because when he said that, I was like, there's no question. You know how many people I've seen come in with an 18-month sentence and end up getting 5 years, 10 years, some with life, you know? So this is a system. We keep saying, you know, off the tips of our tongue, like smooth butter, how prison is a business, but we don't want to really delve into the confines of what that industry produces. Yeah. You know what I mean? What that industry produces. So yeah, we had the forefathers, we had all of this. They came in, they formed, as you said, the three branches, the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. And they came with this preamble. And they started the preamble with big letters that says, "We the people." We the people. And if you know Thomas FreeMe, if you know the people that follow, you know, with me and side by side, this is what we speak on. I say that my channel is for the we the people, that this, everything that Tanawha and I and so many of others are doing is for we the people. So we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. And that's it. That's the preamble. signed September 17th, 1787, ratified June 21st, 1788.
That's an amazing introduction. And there's a couple things that I would want to point out here. One is established justice. Justice didn't exist, and it still doesn't exist, but it has the ability to. So the origin of justice derives from the book, or from Plato, the ancient philosopher Plato, and Socrates. Socrates actually started it, but Plato finished it, and he put it into the book of the Republic. Mm-hmm. And he talks about the origin of justice, where justice comes from. He says that good and bad are both evil, right? Good is to commit injustice or to accuse someone of committing a crime. Bad is to suffer injustice or to be sent to prison and accountable for a crime or for whatever wrongdoing. Now, the reason why good is evil is because we know that it's evil to repay evil for its evil, right? So when someone commits evil against us and we turn around, we say, okay, now I'm going to inflict evil upon you. That is in fact evil. And as a result, good is evil because good cannot produce evil. Only evil can do that. So what he's saying is that good and bad are both evil. Both sides are evil. The prosecutor is evil. What they're doing is wrong. The judge is evil. That's what he's doing is wrong. When you have the justice system itself come out in the criminal procedure manual and say that most prosecutors across the United States agree that as much as 15% of the people in prison are innocent, but that's an acceptable deviance because our system isn't perfect, and then not use the system in the way that it's designed to be used, that's evil. That's very evil. To send anyone innocently to prison and aware of it, and then just smugly blow it off like that's evil. So what Plato's saying is he's saying both sides are evil because justice wouldn't side with one side or the other. Justice cares equally about every single person. He cares about the accused and the accuser. And so justice is actually the middle ground between these two evils. It's not any one of the two sides, because what happens is in a debt-based system such as we have today, you have a debt that's always going to be paid forward. So I'm going to say you have a debt that's owed to me, and I now want to collect my debt, and I'm going to make you a slave or servant to me as a result of that debt. And so then once I collect that debt, now you're going to pay it forward as well. So this debt never gets settled because it's constantly going back and forth, back and forth. And so the theory is that once both sides suffer and commit injustice, both being able to avoid one but not avoid the other, both sides just kind of come together and say, you know what, this isn't working anymore. I don't think we need either one of these. And so they come together in middle ground and they say, you know what, we're gonna make the agreement now, because now we have a new obligation. Now we have a new agreement because the old one wasn't working. We have a new agreement. This new agreement is we are going to give up our right to make our neighbors suffer, and in doing so, we're going to preserve the right to no longer suffer. But we can only do that when we both sides come together and say, you know what, we're both evil. Law enforcement need to own up to the fact that what they're doing is wrong. These judges that are accepting these plea bargains, that are violating their oath and committing extortion 20 times a day, they need to come to terms with the fact that you are evil, and you're more evil than what you want to put.
And it's not the law enforcement. I mean, you're right, yes, but it's the judges. The law enforcement is just a trickle down effect. The law enforcement are just a bunch of, in my opinion, and I'm not singling anybody out, of course, but the general consensus of law enforcement is just a bunch of uneducated lynch mob mentalists, because it's the same mentality as the lynch mob back, as they say. All they did was just trade in their, how does it go? They traded in their dogs for uniforms, or their cloaks for uniforms, or however, the Klan uniforms or whatnot. But
yeah,
it's
so here's the thing with that is that if we create a culture that's unjust, and we create it from those administering it, and you're right, that's it. I think that first it has to fall on the judges, but it has to fall on all three branches, because the legislative branch is absolutely 100% aware that the judicial branch has overstepped its separation of powers and legislated from the bench with Barron versus Baltimore. And ever since 1833, not one United States citizen has ever had the entire protections and privileges of the United States Constitution, because the judicial branch decided that it knew better than the people did how to rule over the people. And the legislative branch, it's their responsibility to say, this is our duty to create legislation. It's our duty to initiate the modification of the Constitution, and not yours. And they have to deal with that separation of powers. 1833 until today, as of right now, Barron versus Baltimore is still standing Supreme Court precedent. How is that? How is it that the first 10 amendments of the Constitution of the United States that we ratified, the people, on December 15, 1791, how is it that not one single United States citizen has ever been protected by those rights that we guaranteed to ourselves? Despite the fact that the 14th Amendment, when it was enacted by Congressman Bingham and Senator Howard, they both read on the floor of House and both sides of the House and Congress, when they were introducing those bills, they specifically read each and every single one of the enumerated rights within the Bill of Rights and said that this is the purpose of the 14th Amendment. And yet, 5 years later, we have the Wake Court saying, nah, I disagree. Barron versus Baltimore still stands. And today, we still have that as standing precedent. You know, these are big problems, huge problems, but we need to be aware of them. I mean, I went to school in Washington, D.C. in law, and I didn't even know this. We got to stop being ignorant here, and we got to stop allowing this stuff to happen. The stuff that we know in our hearts is not right.
Well, this is why we're doing what we're doing, Tanawha, and I thank you again for dedicating your time to bring this to my channel and awareness to my listeners, because this is very important to me as it is to you. You know, this is, I honestly feel that there is a serious war going on inside of our house, inside of our Senate and our House, you know, and I really do feel that there are some strong, valued Americans that is sitting up there that still has American value and is still fighting for what they believe in the Constitution. But I feel that they're getting far and few between, you know, and we're seeing things happening in our country that we've never seen before. And these instances are allowing our rights to be taken away. So being exposed to what I've been exposed to, I have to ask, like, are our children being used, right, to get rid of our gun rights, to take away our gun rights? Was 9/11, right, created to bring in the patriot? Are we under attack in order to diminish this Constitution?
Yeah. So the hedge of protection for America was taken away at 9/11. We no longer have the protection of our God, our Lord. We no longer have the protection of this Constitution. It was taken away. We took this out of our public square. We created this doctrine, or this belief of separation of church and state, and in doing so, we've taken the Constitution out of education. We've taken the Constitution out of public squares. We've taken the Constitution out of our morality. We've allowed ourselves to go down this avenue of depravity without recognizing and remembering what this is, without remembering our heritage and where we come from, without remembering, you know, why America is what it is. We've allowed ourselves and our own people to criticize and badmouth and plunder that which we're supposed to love. I mean, I love my country, and I'm glad that I had the opportunity, the privilege to be able to serve in her military. Although I don't know if I would do that again, because I now understand much. But at the end of the day, we all have to love our country, because if you don't love it, if you're just gonna talk bad about it.
Well, that's a great comment. This what leads in before, you know, we end. I want to, you know, end with this question here. The listener that sat here and listened to this program tonight, what can the average American do every day to ensure that they're doing the best to protect our Constitution and our rights? Like, with somebody that just listened to this program, Tanawha, and they say, you know what can I do? Like, what can I do? What can this person do?
Most people are probably going to say that this would be a cheesy response, or they're going to say that this is too simple. I'm going to turn to Scripture on it. And I'm going to say that in Scripture, it has what's called the golden rule. And it says, do unto others as you would want done unto you.
Amen.
Now, President John Kennedy, he made a very, very similar statement, right? And he said, how can you love your country if you don't love your fellow countrymen? How you treat them is ultimately how you're treating your own government or your own nation. The thing is that we have to be very, very aware that whatever shackles we place onto someone else, those very shackles we will find either on us or on someone that we love, because the law treats everyone the same. We need to understand that we need to do to others what we want done to us. We need to treat them the way that we want to be treated ourselves. And if we're going to treat people with scorn and discontent and imprison them, then we can expect to have the same thing happen to us, because it's going to treat us all the same. You have to understand that the type of government that we have is a government that is unlike any other in the world. It is an egalitarian government that was created by the people, for the people, with no one else above us. We are to be free to be able to have our own faculties, our own decisions. We are to be free to do whatever we want, as long as we're doing it within our conscience. And we're to have no government interference in this. We are to be able to grow and develop and become ourselves, true to whatever God made us to be. But the moment that we start imposing our will upon our neighbor, or we start discriminating against them, or we start bad-mouthing them, or we start telling them
division,
that they have a debt against us,
we start that division
for whatever reason it might be, sex, race, color, doesn't matter. When we do that, we are violating this. We need to remember this is our light. This is our lamp to our feet. This is what's going to control whether or not we continue as a nation or not. This is the only thing that will keep America America. And if we love America and we care about America, we care about the principles that we believe in, that even if they weren't true, we have the power to make them true. We have the power. But the only way that we have power is open up our eyes to what's going on around us and start treating people the way that they deserve to be treated, the way that you want to be treated. Care about your neighbor. Care enough about them that when you see someone being oppressed or taken advantage of, when you see someone being yelled at or harmed by a government agent, you stand up for them. We all have a duty to care for those below us. Everyone else.
Stand up, America. American citizens, we the people, we have to protect one another, stand up for one another. Tanawha, another great episode. Next week we'll start to delve into the First Amendment, and get into the right to speak, which is being hindered today. So God bless you, Tanawha, for what you do. God bless you for the knowledge that you have and the wisdom to explain this knowledge, because it's much needed in this time. And I thank you for providing this knowledge onto my format for my subscribers and my listeners. You're a good man, and you got a lot of good things coming to you. We go through the tests that we go through in order to prepare us for the treasures that come our way, because a lot of times without walking through the fire that we've walked through, we wouldn't appreciate those treasures when they finally came our way. So it's coming. It's coming. So God bless you. We'll reconvene next year. And you just take care of yourself, Tanawha, and my subscribers, as Tanawha just said, and you hear it from me all the time. Just be your best self. Just be your best self. Have a good night. This is Thomas FreeMe with the Thomas FreeMe TV and podcast show. Once again with Tanawha, signing off until next week. We are learning the Constitution of America. Have a good night. Be safe. Happy holidays.
God bless.